Okay.
Everything I know is intellectual labor. Writing is intellectual labor. Understanding is intellectual labor. Science is intellectual labor. School is intellectual labor. Blogging is intellectual labor. Economism is intellectual labor. Knowledge is intellectual labor. A person's thought process is intellectual labor. Getting an education is intellectual labor. Thinking is intellectual labor. Understanding is intellectual labor. Sudoku is intellectual labor. Challenge is intellectual labor. College is intellectual labor. Brainstorming is intellectual labor. Taking the SATs is intellectual labor. Intellectual labor has nothing to do with what college you can afford to go to, but how much of yourself you are willing to put in. Education is intellectual labor. Our spirit or soul is a permanent state we will always be in. Much of yourself you are willing to, how much of yourself you are willing to put into what you are learning, constant change, is a permanent state we will always be in. Not wealthy enough is a permanent state we will always be in. Learning is a permanent state we will always be in. Imperfect is a permanent state we will always be in. Fighting is a permanent state we will always be in. Dead is a permanent state we will always be in. Growing is a permanent state we will always be in. Not supporting the poor is a permanent state we will always be in. The need for wanting more is a permanent state we will always be in. Want is a permanent state we will always be in. Change is a permanent state we will always be in. Inequality is a permanent state we will always be in. Farming is maintained through labor and always has been. The United States is maintained through labor and always has been. Stability is maintained through labor and always has been. Prostitution is maintained through labor and always has been. Relationships are maintained through labor and always have been. Progress is maintained through labor and always has been. Freedom is maintained through labor and always has been. The workforce is maintained through labor and always has been. Made in China merchandise is maintained through labor and always has been. Progress is maintained through labor and always has been. Progress is maintained through labor and always has been. Factory work is maintained through labor and always has been. Capitalism is maintained through labor and always has been. Civilization is maintained through labor and always has been. Journalism is maintained through labor and always has been. Life stability is maintained through labor and always has been. Energy is maintained through labor and always has been. Physical fitness is maintained through labor and always has been. Anything that is worth spending money on is maintained through labor and always has been.